Hello, welcome to video number 4 of this series of revision videos to try and help you prepare for your GCSEs. This question is on paper 1. It's on the American 1920 to 73 section, and the question is, what was the most important factor for the economic boom of the 1920s? Was it Republican policies, or was it the growth of the automobile industry? Okay, right. So, 12 marks, 15 minutes, 3 paragraphs. Now, my advice to you in terms of timing is to spend 6 minutes each looking at the two factors that are there, Republican policies and the growth of the automobile industry. And then that takes you to 12 minutes, and then you spend 3 minutes on a conclusion where you're trying to link those two factors together. Essentially, what you should be trying to do in the conclusion there is trying to say how one thing caused the other. So could you argue, which you can, that Republican policies led to the growth of the automobile industry? So that's what I'll be trying to do. So to start off with, essentially, you want to be using the language of the question, and you want to make sure that you're hitting both bullet points in order to get above half marks. I would start with this. Republican policies are the most important reason for the economic boom in the 1920s, as they allowed US businesses to make larger profits. So that's my first point. Then I'm going to move on to say the evidence. Well, essentially, the evidence for the economic boom here and the Republican policies is based around a set of policies that the Republican Party, whilst they were in government throughout the 1920s, put in place. And it's called laissez-faire policies. Now, all three presidents, Warren Harding, Calvin Coolidge, and Herbert Hoover, all had very, very similar policies, okay, in terms of managing the economy. Laissez-faire. So what you would say is that Republican policies were really important as they allowed businesses to make more profit and therefore pay their workers more. This would then follow on by saying that laissez-faire policies meant low taxation, which meant that businesses could make more profit. More profit meant higher shares, which fed into the stock market. You then also say that higher profits mean potentially more workers, which means that workers can afford to buy more things, which feeds or fuels the consumer boom. When people are buying radios, what you're trying to do is link in these laissez-faire policies to other sides of the economic boom. Another one you could talk about is tariffs. Okay, the Republican Party, whilst they're in government, put in place a series of tariffs to protect US businesses. Essentially, what they were trying to do was to try and make foreign imports, which would normally be cheaper, unattractive to the American buyer. So, for example, if I'm looking at buying a car, normally a car from France might be cheaper. But with a tariff being put on, the most famous one being the Ford-Lee-Macomber tariff. So that's the Ford-Lee-Macomber. This then made American goods look far cheaper, as they weren't having to pay a large tariff on them. Now that obviously meant that American businesses were booming, they're making more profit, and also fed in to an increased consumer spending in American goods. Now, if you were going to have an evaluation point, which you could do on that first paragraph, you could say that actually tariffs, although they did in the short term lead to the economic boom, in the long term, they helped lead to the Wall Street crash. Because basically tariffs slowed down the world economy so that no one was trading with each other. So that is Republican policies covered off. Your second paragraph is looking at the automobile industry. And this is where you would then say that the automobile industry was the most important reason for the growth or the cause of the economic boom, because it led to the growth of other industries. And then my evidence would be Henry Ford revolutionized the way that cars were made with the implementation of the assembly line in the 1920s. Cars could then be produced once every 10 or 20 seconds and could be produced far cheaper for as little as $300. This meant that many more consumers could buy the cars, which increased demand for these cars and meant that, additionally, the materials that were needed to produce the cars also benefited. So we're talking about glass, rubber, steel, leather, okay? All of which benefited from the growth in the car industry. So much so that a massive 80% of the glass that was being produced was being used for the car industry at one point. You could then say that this then led on to a economic boom in consumer industries, because people were able to get goods transported from factories to their homes far easier. You could also say it led to an economic boom because it changed the way people lived. It led to the development of roads. It led to the development of new houses, which impacted the construction industry, because people could all of a sudden live outside of the places where they were working. They could travel in, which meant that new towns and new suburbs popped up from everywhere. And obviously that feeds into construction. Essentially what you need to do is you just need to link either of these bullet points into other elements of the economic boom and make sure it's linked together. Your conclusion, so the third section, would be where you are basically saying that, well, personally I would say that the Republican policies are more important, as the low taxes and the tariffs allowed the car industry to be successful. If it wasn't for these low taxes and tariffs, it may be that companies such as Ford would not have been as successful as selling their product, and it may be that the car industry would not have, the cars would not have spread out to so many people, which may have meant that all the benefits that people saw for the economy from the car industry would have been reduced. That would be what I said. Now you could argue the other way and say that car industry was more important, as it made the Republicans want to support business by the fact they were booming. But I would stick with my original point. Now, what are your pitfalls with this? Well, the pitfalls are potentially thinking or confusing the economic boom of the 20s with the economic boom of the 50s. Your pitfall, again, could be where you are mixing up consumerism in the 20s and the 50s. So don't talk about TVs in the 50s. There were none. And another big sort of mistake you can make is not talking about both bullet points. When it says what was the most important reason, it sort of infers it wants you to talk about one. It doesn't. It wants you to talk about two. So that's about it, really. It's a shorter video because it's a shorter question. There's only 3 paragraphs. But if you have liked what you've seen, please don't forget to like or share, or to subscribe for more of these videos as we get close to the exam season. All right. See you soon. Bye.